Hi, I'm Mesla Justice, and we're watching Demon Core, the true story by Cal Hill. Let's get to it!
In 1946, a P-239 plutonium core scheduled for detonation by nuclear bomb was harmlessly melted down and reintegrated into the United States' nuclear stockpile. That was the end of a 14-pound metallic sphere that had killed 2 scientists not 11 months before.
I know all the YouTube commenters, y'all have warned me about this core and how it killed 2 scientists during the process. But also, I didn't realize they would deconstruct it and not put it into a storage place or something for future use, like all the nuclear armed storage we have.
This is the true story of the Demon Core. The spheres of atomic material that had obliterated the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki would have easily fit in your hand, and they were light enough to carry. Because of the extreme levels of radiation coming from them, the cores were carried around in secure containers, but curious physicists reported that the cores were disturbingly warm to the touch. Both the Little Boy and Fat Man nuclear bombs use subcritical masses of uranium and plutonium respectively, meaning that no self-sustaining nuclear reaction would be possible with the spheres alone, and the nickel plating that covered them would prevent most of the escaping radiation from harming you. The real harm comes later. The terrible explosions that Little Boy and Fat Man are famous for only happen when a nuclear core goes critical, using directed conventional explosives to artificially induce a critical mass. This meant literally compressing a plutonium or uranium sphere into a much smaller volume with explosions. Now, neutrons emitted from natural radioactivity would be much more likely to go on and impact other atoms before escaping, leading to a chain reaction of exponentially more and more atoms releasing tremendous energy.
So, how close is this to the Chernobyl issue where they accidentally pushed the rod too far in and it got stuck? Is that similar how they made these explosions happen? I don't know if I should be asking that question. Don't knock on my door. Certain letters. But I'm just curious, is the technology used to push nuclear reactions in power plants similar to how the bombs went off? Is there any A plus B equals C, or is it A to Z where they're nothing alike and there's just a very finite bit of similarities between the two, but the similarities are so small that they're more different than alike?
At the heart of an atomic blast is a radioactive core filled with atoms poised like rat traps. All the bomb itself does is force one of those traps to snap.
Oh, I like this. Tickling the dragon's tail. Nice.
The so-called Demon Core was the third core of fissionable nuclear material made during the World War II era. It was also supposed to be dropped on Japan, but after the Empire's prompt surrender following the obliteration of Nagasaki, the core had no immediate military use.
Alright, that makes sense. I mean, if we weren't going to drop it, what were we going to do with it? And I mean, it seems like storaging is unsafe for it in general. Especially, we know now, hindsight, it killed people. 2 people, just from doing stuff with it. But if we look at the measurements, it looks like by the tape measure, it looks like it might be in the 4 to 3.5 range to 8. So maybe 4 inches wide? Maybe 5? So very tiny. They're not kidding when they say it could fit in the palm of your hand. That's very, very tiny. I'm glad they put the ruler for scale. Really am. Really am glad there's a ruler for scale.
Instead, a physicist working at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico after the war decided to use the remaining core to figure out just what it takes to make a core like this go critical. When Otto Robert Frisch first arrived in the United States, he was placed at Los Alamos to study neutron multiplication in uranium and plutonium. These elements naturally radiate neutrons in the process of nuclear decay, and as we said, if there is enough of the radioactive element close enough together, these neutrons can go on to cause the rat trap style reaction as neutrons slam more neutrons free from other atoms. However, there is another way to force criticality other than just having a giant sphere of plutonium, which would be hard to make. It turns out that if you use a very thick material to reflect neutrons coming out of the material back upon itself like a mirror would. A self-sustaining reaction can occur with substantially less plutonium or uranium. Even though an explosion might not happen after criticality is reached in all cases, a deadly blast of radiation certainly could. And that's exactly what happened. By 1944, Frisch was leading the Critical Assembly Group at Los Alamos and started a dangerous series of near-criticality testing. The physicists in the group wanted to use neutron-reflective materials around spheres of plutonium and uranium to see just how close they could get to going critical, without explosives and without going over the edge. Commenting on the inherent risk of experiments of this kind, legendary physicist Richard Feynman reportedly said that the experiments were like, quote, tickling the tail of a sleeping dragon.
So they were really just trying to edge the reaction as close as they could to a mushroom cloud, but keeping it containable. They really were trying not to wake the dragon to see how much of a reaction they could get. They were playing with danger. Don't do that at home. Don't do that at home. I swear. Like, this is very dangerous. I'm laughing, but just like, this is so dangerous. Like, whenever you make volatile reactions, you should always make sure there's safety precautions in there and that there's ways to stop it if it goes wrong. So typically catalysts will drive reactions forward, and you always want to make sure there's a way to quench it, which means to stall, slow it, or stop it. It is always important to know that because it can potentially save your life. As someone who's had to quench reactions at work, it is very vital to know how to make something stop if you can, and have safeguards in place.
End quote. But even with the very real possibility of being roasted alive by the radioactive fire of a failed criticality test, the tickling the dragon's tail experiments continued. Within 2 years, neutron reflection experiments on the Demon Core would claim the lives of 2 scientists, Harry K. Daghlian Jr. and Louis Slotin, in almost the exact same way.
The half-life of
On August 21st, 1945, Harry K. Daghlian Jr. was conducting a criticality experiment with the Demon Core. He was placing tungsten carbide bricks around the mass of plutonium to see how many bricks and in what orientation it would take to reflect enough neutrons to cause the core to go critical. That afternoon, using a Geiger counter-like device to measure the radiation coming off of the plutonium, he got close enough to criticality that he decided to end the experiment. Now, this result should have been worth just a few graphite streaks in a notebook and maybe a beer at the local bar with the other physicists, but Daghlian was curious. Later that night, he returned, alone, to his assembly for another test.
First mistake, never do anything in any kind of lab scientifically alone. That's when things go wrong. Even at work, we are required to work in pairs, as if there has to be someone within the building if something starts to go wrong that they can respond to you. You never do dangerous things like this by yourself. I know curiosity killed the cat, and in this case, yeah, you've got to have a friend. You've got to have a buddy. That's just a basic safety thing.
Like the tests before, Daghlian created an orientation of bricks that his measuring device told him was nearly critical. As he was placing one last brick, the measuring device indicated that the core would go critical if he continued on the assembly. The dragon would wake up. So cautiously, he began removing the final brick, and then he dropped it. The moment the brick hit the assembly, the Demon Core instantly went supercritical. And according to Daghlian, there was a blast of blue light and a wave of heat. Daghlian reacted quickly, though, and used his right hand to knock the dropped brick all the way to the floor. In those fractions of a second, Harry had received a fatal dose of radiation. In fact,
this is very sad. Very, very sad. Let me explain to you. It's a very bad way to go. And I remember reading not just about radiation and like how it affects people, but like I remember there were cases where people would do reactions like in buckets to try to cut corners, and the reactions would go south and release things like radiation and basically kill them. And there was the one guy, let me see if I can find his name right quick for you guys. So y'all do know about the kept alive after radiation case of Hishani. You know what, I'm just gonna spell this for y'all because I cannot say it. H-I-S-A. Let me start over. Scrubby, edit that out. I will spell it for you guys. H-I-S-A-S-H-I-O-U-C-H-I. He was a 35-year-old technician who absorbed 17 servants of radiation during a nuclear fuel processing accident in Japan, and doctors kept him alive for 83 days. He became a science experiment to see if they could have him survive. Like, radiation is no joke, and 9 times out of 10, if you're exposed to a great dose of it, you're already dead. There's nothing they can do to save you. It's a very, very dangerous profession. Hi, Ketchup Packets, and I bring you some exciting news. I have partnered with Drink Gamer Girl to bring you some of my favorites include Ash to Mouth, Dragon Girl Bathwater, and Berry Horde. These all offer different things, including from hydration, electrolytes, caffeine, and the ability to help you focus more. If you're unsure about what to get, I got news for you! You can buy the sample pack and try the flavors before you commit to any of them at just the cost of shipping. Check out now and use code BURN for 10% off on my line.
In fact, he had endured what was likely the highest acute dose of radiation of any human in history. 25 days later, Daghlian fell into a coma and died from organ failure owing to severe radiation poisoning. This photo, taken 9 days after the accident by medical staff, is of the hand that Harry had used to stop the demon core. He was 24. Harry wasn't completely alone and experimenting in the lab that night. A security guard, Private Robert J. Hemmerly, was also sitting at his desk next to Daghlian reading his newspaper. Hemmerly died 33 years after Daghlian Jr. from what is now considered to be radiation-caused leukemia. He was 29 and the father of 2 at the time of exposure. Harry K. Daghlian Jr. was the first official fatality from a criticality accident and the first American casualty of the atomic age. He had arranged to have his body donated to science after his inevitable end so that scientists could study the effects of radiation exposure on the human body. During the 25 days after his fatal mistake, Daghlian's colleague Louis Slotin spent many hours at his bedside, comforting the 24-year-old as radiation poisoning slowly claimed him.
Alright, let me just say, I'm glad he did end up having a security guard as like a second person, but again, your second person needs to be like aware of what you're doing and nearby, not just far away. Like the second he was trying to remove bricks, he should have probably had a second person helping him remove them. It's like in the chemical labs when we work with, depending upon which scale you're looking at, you could be talking about a 1A, which means deadly, or a 4, which means deadly. With those type of chemicals, you always have a buddy in the lab with you to where you can't come out of the hood, and if, for instance, you need your nose scratched, they're supposed to help do that so you don't accidentally pull your hands out subconsciously just to scratch your nose, because the material is so dangerous. I know this is a long time ago, and hopefully now those safety things are in place, but yeah, typically things like this, especially where I work at, we would not be left alone unless we had a supervisor or another colleague that's trusted high enough up to be in that room.
Exactly 7 months later, in the same hospital, Louis Slotin would suffer the exact same fate. By 1946, physicist Louis Slotin had taken over the critical assembly group from Frisch. Though the criticality experiments were moved from the Omega site at Los Alamos to the Palajito laboratory, the dangerous nature of the experiments did not change. In addition to Feynman's continued warnings, physicist Enrico Fermi said that, quote, "Keep doing that experiment that way, and you'll be dead within a year." But Louis Slotin wasn't worried, and the experiments continued. On May 21st, 1946, Slotin was conducting another criticality experiment with the Demon Core. This time, though, instead of using tungsten bricks, Slotin was testing the critical point of the core by placing it inside 2 half spheres made of beryllium and lowering those halves until there was just a sliver of space before the sphere was complete. If the core was completely enclosed, the reflection of neutrons would be total, and the dragon would wake again. The local expert among experts, Slotin was reportedly brash in his experimental protocols. In his signature pair of blue jeans and cowboy boots, Slotin would perform the criticality tests without the fail-safe spacers that would sit on the half spheres and keep it from ever completely closing. Instead, he would put his bare hand on the top half sphere and attempt to lower it using only the blade of a flathead screwdriver.
This is the screwdriver y'all were telling me about, the infamous screwdriver that killed people. I remember in y'all's comments, y'all were like, they did it with a screwdriver, and I was like, what the fuck? The chemist inside me was going, no. But before you guys ask, no, I do not work in nuclear stuff. I work with other chemicals. And a story for another time I'll tell you guys about, I accidentally almost exposed myself to one of the primary ingredients in mustard gas one time. And I had to quench the reaction really quickly. That's why I'm telling you, this stuff is not something to play with. And before you say, did I mix something wrong? No, it was actually part of my procedure. But they did leave the failsafe as a note that if it starts to go south, please use XYZ to stop it. And luckily, I proceeded with caution.
That way, he could get much closer to criticality. And Slotin had successfully completed this experiment dozens of times. The afternoon of the accident, Louis Slotin was conducting the same screwdriver experiment as 7 other colleagues recorded and watched. It was just like the test before, but for whatever reason, this time, the screwdriver slipped. The moment the spheres touched, the demon core went prompt critical.
I just want to say both these cases happened because they dropped something. One dropped a brick, one dropped a screwdriver.
Reflected neutrons coming from the plutonium inside the sphere instantly initiated supercriticality. Like the Doglian accident, there was a flash of blue light and a wave of the dragon's heat before Slotin could flip the top half sphere off of the assembly. Naturally, the 7 other scientists in the room ran out as fast as they could as the accident occurred, but Slotin shouted them all to get back and tossed them a stick of chalk. He told them each to mark down precisely where they were standing. By establishing their positions relative to the demon core, Slotin would be able to calculate just how much radiation each person had just absorbed, and how much their lives had just been shortened. According to physicist Raymer Schreiber, who was present in the room,
did that 3-month-old mean there was a 3-month-old baby in that room?
With Slotin that day, Slotin's first words immediately after the incident were, quote, "Well, that does it." Louis Slotin died of severe radiation poisoning 9 days later at the age of 35. He died in the same hospital as Harry Doglian Jr. on another Tuesday the 21st as a result of the same accident with the same hunk of radioactive material. They even were cared for by the same nurse. The demonstration that day was supposed to be the final demonstration with the core before it was used in a test detonation, and it was. In those few moments, Louis Slotin had been exposed to over 1,000 rads of radiation from the neutrons and gamma rays blasting out of the demon core. This is possibly the highest dose of radiation any human has ever taken. As a comparison, 1,000 meters from ground zero in Hiroshima, the neutron radiation was measured as less than half of what Slotin had absorbed in those fractions of a second. Since 1945, over 60 criticality accidents have been recorded, leading to at least 21 deaths in facilities and labs all around the world. The flash of blue light that so often accompanies these incidents is an indication of the invisible radiation being released. As high-energy particles crash through the air, like these particles exiting a cyclotron, they excite the air molecules. The only way for these molecules to return to a lower energy state is to release some radiation of their own, photons of light. But while gases can absorb and re-emit the energy imparted to it by nuclear material, human bodies cannot. Instead, particles and gamma rays flying out of the nuclear cores rip electrons from the molecules that make you up and smash your cellular machinery beyond repair. When enough molecular damage is done, radiation sickness can manifest itself as everything from vomiting and diarrhea to blisters, inflammation, impaired cognition, widespread organ failure, confusion, nausea, high fever, dizziness. 5 weeks later, on July 1st, 1946, a different nuclear core was destroyed in a 23-kiloton air-deployed nuclear weapon over Bikini Atoll. It was supposed to be the end of the Demon Core. Instead, the Demon Core was melted down and redistributed throughout the rest of the United States stockpile, effectively getting a brand new half-life. Until next time. Yeah, story time with Kyle's a little serious, huh? Thank you so much to the very nerdy staff at the
Also, Cal, I appreciate it. I appreciate your video. I appreciate all the work you did on this. And that was actually really cool, chat. I'm really glad y'all recommended him, and also about the Demon Court, because I honestly didn't know about it, but I definitely will say that I learned a lot. And I mean, I honestly didn't know there was a Demon Core. I am going to show you guys one thing though today. This is unusual. Normally I do not. 1999 disaster. So this is what happened with the thing I was telling you about. This is about the buckets with the reaction going forward to make radiation. They were making it in a bucket, and since it was in a bucket, of course it had none of the potential, you know, safety hazards. And as you see, human error, serious breach of safety principles according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. And this was in 1999. If you ever want to learn about this, I say it's a very, very interesting thing to read, and to also talk about. This, of course, happened in Japan, as you can see. And if I remember right, the guy I mentioned is actually from this. Let me see if I can find it. Alright, here we go. Here is Japan's worst nuclear accident, leaving 2 fighters for their lives. This was 49 people exploding to radiation, 2 with potential lethal doses after Japan's worst nuclear accident struck a uranium processing plant in 30th of September. This also is Tokomaru of West Japan. And this is about the man I told you about who was basically treated as a science experiment. They kept him alive for a while, but I am not going to go over his case in this video in particular. But if you guys would like to watch it, it is so interesting, and I highly recommend it if you want to see the effects of radiation and how we tried to stop it and reverse it. And unfortunately, we just could not keep it down. We did prolong it, but unfortunately, he still did pass. And guys, that's it for this video. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. I'm Mesl Justice, and I hope to see you in the future.